Welcome back to Outdoors with Larry Ray on ESPN 790 AM. Brought to you proudly by Sportsman's Warehouse and the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency.
Hey, good Saturday morning. Welcome back to Outdoors with Larry Ray on this November the 16th, which is third Saturday, which means my good friend Frank Barton from Indian Motorcycles, Barton Power Sports, Barton Equipment, and a longtime friend who's anxiously awaiting the start of duck season as he has come back from the Master Nationals in South Carolina, and glad to have Frank in studio. And it was good to talk with Jacob Bettis about grabber, those hand warmer things. And I can imagine this next gentleman that's on the show has knows a little bit about cold weather. Anybody that grew up in Wisconsin knows a little bit about cold weather. I'm not even going to ask him what the temperature is this morning because Memphis has been colder than Anchorage. So I'm afraid to ask anybody what the temperature is, but we're really privileged to have on today's show, thanks to Nick Kolbick. He's the communications director from MEPS and Mr. Twister, and we have Mr. Twister and Mr. MEPS himself, the president of MEPS, Mike Sheldon. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Larry. And it's not too bad here today. We've had some weather down around zero already this year, but it's in the 20s today.
Okay. Well, that's not bad. That's what it's probably going to be when I leave the studio and go deer hunting. It usually is about that time. But your company, Mike, has been a part of this thing for a long time, and I know the history of it and everything like that, and following what your dad, Todd, is that right? Your dad,
right.
He discovered MEPS, I understand, the spinner in 1951. And just it's amazing. So you've been a part of this thing. So talk about growing up as a member of the first family for MEPS.
Well, of course, I was always exposed to fishing from a young age. And actually, my dad had a retail sporting goods store in Antigo in the late 40s.
Uh-huh.
And that's when he was given his first MEPS spinners. And they didn't impress him by their looks, so he didn't even fish with them for a couple of years. And it was probably in the early 50s the first time he fished with a MEPS spinner.
And he saw a kid fishing and caught a bigger fish than him, and he saw that was on that fishing lure was what? A squirrel tail.
Right.
A squirrel tail. Is that a true story?
It is. My dad was fishing on the Wolf River, which is a pretty famous fishery locally.
Oh, it is, yes.
And he had caught a nice bunch of trout, and he got back to his car and was proud of his trout, and there was a kid there, so he showed this kid his fish. And then the young fellow showed my dad what he had caught, and he had a limit of trout too, but they were bigger.
And
my dad said, "Well, what did you catch those on?" And the boy showed him a MEPS spinner that he had caught him on, and he had tied some squirrel tail on the spinner.
And we know the rest of that story now,
right?
Because since then, you guys have been noted for your squirrel tail program that I've talked about for my many years on the radio and in the newspapers and things along that line. And has come almost a part of American tradition, so to speak, that people will actually send you their squirrel tails. If they meet all the requirements, you can get up to 26 cents a squirrel tail. But at the same time, your company, as I look at that program, you have kept your company still at the front end of the cutting edge, the MEPS. And then also, of course, we're familiar down here in the South, so to speak, of Mr. Twister. And you're a program with that out of Louisiana. So talk about the company, because if I'm not mistaken, I've read somewhere that the company started in a 10-foot square room in the back of a small sports shop in your town there with your dad, you and your brother, and now look what's happened. Talk about the company growth.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, my dad had a retail sports shop, and of course the MEPS spinners were just a tiny part of it. But as he caught fish on MEPS spinners, and then the local people started to catch fish on MEPS spinners, it grew, and he got out of the retail sporting goods business
yeah.
and just concentrated on selling MEP spinners.
And now you have the facility. Last time I heard it was 50,000 square feet. Is that pretty close?
Yes, that's correct.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And now you also have MEPS France and then
Right.
and Mr. Twister.
Right.
Talk about that, Mr. Twister, because in Minden, Louisiana, that's your company now has transitioned into different facets, but at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, your roots are still right there in fishing.
Right. In the Mr. Twister part of the business, of course, it started in Louisiana and was the original curly tail.
It was, yes.
Soft plastic curly tail fishing lure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're real strong in the South, where our backyard, of course, is in the North. And we sell some MEP spinners in the South, and they're pretty strong up here in the North with Mr. Twister.
Well, you've got them all of that, and then getting back to where I wanted to start and finish with is the squirrel program. I think that's pretty interesting, the way that how did your dad come up with squirrel tails and not something else? Because somebody told me that y'all even considered Angus cow. So I mean, talk about how it came to that.
Yeah, of course, the original idea came from the young fisherman that he ran into out on the Wolf River that day.
Uh-huh.
But over time, he found that squirrel tail was just a great type of hair to use on a fishing lure. Most of the other types of hair have an undercoat which is more of a fur.
Yes.
And so it doesn't have the action. And of course, cow tail, particularly calf tail, is fairly soft and it has a good action, but they just weren't as readily available as squirrel tail either.
And now this has become, it's part of tradition. I don't guess you don't want to end it, but it all goes back to cooperation with the squirrel hunters. And we're losing squirrel hunters, but the tradition remains.
Right. It's becoming more difficult all the time to get squirrel tails. Like you say, there are less squirrel hunters, small game hunters, and I guess the price of a tail probably doesn't mean as much to people, or maybe in a lot of cases they aren't even aware that they can sell those tails to us or trade them at twice the value for lures.
And the thing about it is, you've also, of course, I think that maybe your dad or somebody posted a sign in front of the store, squirrel tails needed.
Right. We still have a sign out on the highway.
Do you really? Okay.
Yeah, every once in a while we see where somebody put up a picture of that because it's kind of unusual.
Well, sure it is. Yeah, posted it on Facebook now. I mean, now that we're in the social media. Your dad, I know, was so influential in the fishing industry, starting from that small store and everything. And I know passing this on, how was it you growing up? Knowing your dad, I think, he was 81 when he died. Is that right? Back in 95? So,
right.
How do you think he would have perceived the way the industry has changed and things?
Well, he saw it changing, while he was still alive.
Uh-huh.
And there were a lot of dramatic changes that went on. Anybody that fishes knows that it's become more difficult all the time to find mom and pop bait shop where you can get everything from live bait to rods and reels and spinners and whatnot, and some good advice. And it's oriented more toward big box stores and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot less retail outlets than there used to be, but the ones that are around are bigger.
Aren't you guys still noted if you drive by and you want to come in? I think Nick told me you'll do you give tours. I mean,
right.
I don't know too many big lure companies will say, "Come on in, you know, and I think that's part of your family tradition there, isn't it?
It is, and people find it fascinating because I think they just have in mind that, well, you probably pour a bunch of lure parts in a machine and then a spinner comes out. And it's not like that at all. It's real labor intensive and a lot of small parts to work with. And it actually takes people that do assemble lures a couple of years to get really good at it.
Really? So, I mean, and you've probably got employees that have been there a while, too, since your family run.
We do. We have a lot of 25, 30-year employees and some 40-year employees.
That's amazing. So. Yeah. And I think your company, and nothing against everybody else, but you still make them one at a time, like they used to say a boat was made. If you get a MEPS lure, you know that somebody has touched that and somebody has okayed it, right?
Right. And it's right here in Antigo it happened, too. It wasn't made in China and packaged by us. We do it all right here.
And he just told you they got more than one red light in there, over 8,000 people. And I recommend on your way to Hayward, up in the North Park, to see that Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame, you go to Antigo, Wisconsin, and stop by. And look for that sign out front. It says Squirrel Tails Wanted. Hey, Mike, we appreciate you being with us on Outdoors with Larry Ray. You guys have been a long supporter through your different marketing people. Of course, the original man was back there that helped me out kick this thing off. And you know who I'm talking about, that handled your marketing for a long time. And I just appreciate you guys. I guess we've given away MEPS lures for 18 of the 19 years we've been on the air. You guys have you've always been part of this Outdoors of Larry Ray. And so you tell hello to Nick. Let's stay in touch. And anything we can do down here, we would love to get you back on, maybe back in the spring or sometime, okay?
Okay, well, thank you. And really, we'd love to have people stop in for a tour.
Well, we may leave tomorrow, but my snowmobile is out of gas, so I don't know if I can make it right now. Thank you, Mike. Have a great day, okay?
All right, thanks, Larry.
Thanks. All right, let's take a break on Outdoors with Larry. Close it out. We got the man himself in the studio here. Got his uniform on. He's not Frank Barton either. We'll be right back.